Welcome back, Fully Armed family. I hope everybody's doing good. Today's episode is with a very talented singer-songwriter from Southern California, Presley Tennant. She was, as you'll find out, she was a contestant on The Voice back a few years ago. And she's just full of the spirit. She's got a great, great story. And actually, as you listen, you'll find that we're talking about horses and animals, and I say, well, we're going to get to something later. And we never got around to it, and that's my fault. Bad host. It's Riffs and Rescues. It's her charity initiative, and you can find out more about that on her website, PresleyTennant.com. So I hope you guys enjoy it. If you do like the episode, or if you like any of our episodes, please subscribe, follow, click the buttons, and share this with your friends. So here you go, Presley Tennant on Fully Armed.
Welcome to the Fully Armed Podcast with Chris Hennessee. You got your armor on?
All right, welcome to Fully Armed. I'm sitting here with Presley Tennant. How you doing, Presley?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing good.
Very nice.
Appreciate you coming into. So I was telling. So we got Anna sitting with us too.
Yep.
Like I said, this is the Wild West. This RV is. This is. I call Miss Judy because the lovely lady that I purchased it from is Judy. And we were in the process of trying to. What are we going to call this thing? And for some reason, it just kept sticking. So, welcome to the Judy Mobile armored car. And so one of the things about this is somebody may come walking in the door. You just never know what's going to happen here.
I love that.
And we're in a parking lot, so if you get. So Presley, you're in visiting Nashville right now, right?
Yes.
Okay, where do you live right now?
So I live in Southern California.
You're from there, right?
Yes, born and raised. A little horse town called Norco.
Okay.
And so, but I've been coming out here to Nashville since I was 18, but more consistently once a month. So I feel like I'm kind of split in time at this point. Within the past 2 years, I'm out here once a month for a week to 3 weeks, that sort of thing.
Now, growing up in that part of the world, did you grow up around horses, livestock, that stuff?
I wish I was cool, and so I didn't.
Yeah.
But no, but I always had, my family, when they bought the property out there, they loved, because everything is horse property.
Right.
But my parents, they never got into horses. I wish they did, because I remember growing up, everyone had them around me.
Yeah.
And it was the coolest thing, like even from school when you're being picked up and like your mom is like on the horse and it's like, okay, come on, let's go home.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember my grandpa growing up, he had one and I would go over to his house every once in a while, but it was not, we were a very soccer oriented family.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So our hobbies went over there.
Yeah.
It wasn't really a hobby, it was like a lifestyle at that point.
It
so
is, yeah. Yeah.
But,
well, they don't say the phrase soccer mom for no reason, right? It
was not really a soccer mom. My mom was like, oh, I'll go to the games, but my dad was my coach.
Oh,
all
wow.
growing up.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
it was soccer dad,
Yeah.
and it was a terrifying drive home if like you messed up on the field, and it was like you just got lectured the entire time, and I was like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
No, but it was I'm really glad I got to spend that time with him growing up because it was a different type of bond. Mm-hmm. Like my mom and I had a bond growing up from when I started doing music, because it would be her and I driving up to LA 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And then my dad, and then I would race home to go to soccer practice with my dad, and I'd be with him for a couple hours. So it's like I got a little bit of everything.
Yeah. That's cool. But I have seen and noticed that you do have an endearment to our furry friends, though, right?
Oh, yes, I do.
We'll talk about that a little bit. So you grew up in Southern California, and then you got into music early, right?
I did.
Yeah.
I was about 10 years old when
Wow.
I started in the industry.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when I was 7, it was kind of just like, it was more for fun. I loved singing growing up.
Yeah.
I did it all around the house. American Idol was like the show.
Yeah.
It was family night every like Monday and Wednesday when it was on
Really?
Fox, and we all sat down in the living room and we would vote and we would like watch everything.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like where I got the love and introduction into music.
So do you remember American Idol? Which one was your first one that you really remember watching and digging into?
Ooh.
Do you remember? Because I remember when it started.
I know it was 2002.
Yeah.
But that was the year I was born, so I mean, there's not much I can remember
I didn't know
then.
if you remember like the first one you remember, God, that person blew your mind, or whatever it might have been.
I think it was I don't know which one came first, but
Yeah.
I just remember certain people from certain things. Like
Right.
I remember like Philip Phillips and David Archuleta and Lauren Elena and
Yeah.
Scotty McCreery and all them. And I was just like, oh, like I remember little bits and pieces of each season. I couldn't tell you what order any of them were in.
Yeah. No, I get it. So 10, huh?
Yeah.
So were you ever like shy or afraid to walk out and sing, or was it just like, bam, I don't care?
It's funny because I remember growing up and I was definitely more of like the shy kid. I would hide around my mom. Like whenever we ran into people or would talk to people,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to just peek my head around. My mom's like, Presley, get your butt out here. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
But then it was one of those things whenever there was a stage, I wasn't nervous. It was kind of one of those places where I could just kind of let go.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And so it's like I started doing vocal lessons at 7 years old. And it was one of those, like, when I put my mind to something, then I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
That's always how I have been. I remember, I think I was 7 and I told my mom I wanted to take vocal lessons. She's like, okay, go find it online and send me the number.
How about
And I took the step further and I found the girl and she was from the area. She did like mobile vocal
wow.
lessons.
How
So she
about
would
that?
come to your house.
Yeah.
And I called her and I was like, hey, I'm Presley. I want to take vocal lessons. Call my mom back. And so she called my mom the next day and was like, your daughter is calling strangers off the internet. Just wanted to let you know, telling them to come over to your house.
How about that?
But I mean, it ended up working out. And so I started there, went to another vocal coach by 10 years old and started doing like these recitals and different singing competitions near where I live.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just fell in love with being on stage.
Yeah.
I just felt like I could let everything go and kind of live in the moment.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I was introduced to the girl group from the vocal competitions, and that just gave me a new complete insight to everything there was to do with music.
Right. So where you grew up, so I like geography, but I don't know every little town. How close were you? Said Southern California. Is it closer to like San Diego, LA, or what were you close to?
I like to say if you put LA, San Diego, and Palm Springs in a triangle, I am right in the middle
Right in the
of
middle.
it. Yeah.
So did you spend much time in LA, like when you were younger, as far as getting into the music business and scene? Is that where you would travel to?
Yeah, so it was between Temecula, which is closer to San Diego, and LA. I would be kind of back and forth between both those places. And it was, I think, at one point I was up there 5 days a week, rehearsing from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. It depended on whether I was in school or not. But then I made my parents homeschool me because I wanted to do music, and I was sitting in school and I would skip recess and I'd do my homework. My teacher would come over and be like, you need to go play. And I'm like, okay. I was like, well, my mom told me I can't go and do what I want to do if I don't finish my homework, so I'm going to go do it.
Yeah. So you were rehearsing for?
It was the girl group, and it was
group.
called 5 LPs,
Yes.
or the 5 Little Princesses.
Yeah,
We
how
were a
about that?
pop Christian girl group, wore pink tutus out to the side,
Oh my God.
knee-high bedazzled Converse.
Yeah.
Honestly, looking back at it, it was like the cutest thing ever, but I remember as soon as it ended, I was like, this never happened. Like, I was like, I felt like Barbie. I was like, when you grow up and everything is, people pull up pictures and they're like, oh my God, that's you. And you're like, no, I'm cringing.
No.
Like,
Well, we all had to go through those
Exactly,
moments.
yeah.
And but yeah, that's a glamorous one to go through right there.
honestly, I had the best time
Yeah.
doing it. And especially, I was coming into this, I mean, like I said, I thought I was going to be doing soccer my entire life. I thought I was going to be playing soccer, go to college, go to school, play there, and then try to get on the women's U.S. national team.
Yeah.
And so I thought that's what because everyone in my family played soccer. It was just kind of like, this is what you do. And so when I found music, and then I was introduced to the girl group, and they showed me so many different aspects of it. I thought, growing up, it was like you were on Disney Channel, you were a star, and that was it. Like that was just the way it goes.
Right.
I didn't know that there was.
Well, there was a blueprint for that. There were a lot.
Well, and that's
right.
yeah. And which was really cool. But it's like there was different aspects, and so I auditioned for the group. I spent like a week and a half with them in a training process, learning all their choreography, and I couldn't dance. These girls were professional dancers. I mean, one of them's like a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader now,
How about that?
and the other one's touring around the world choreographing. And I was like, I could do a somersault, maybe like a little jazz, like jazz hands. And so I auditioned for the group, and then they cut me, and I was like devastated. And so the next day I found another place that did like artist development when you were like 10 years old.
Yeah.
And so I started going there.
So this is all you, right? I mean, this is not like mom going, come on, we got to go do this. This was you.
Yeah. It was, well, and that's the thing. It's like I had no idea this whole thing existed. I mean, I grew up, growing up, I danced every once in a while, but it wasn't my main thing. But I remember as soon as I got there, I fell in love with it. I'd only been there like a week. Never knew this existed. And then I remember when I got cut, I was devastated.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh. And then at one point I was like, I'm going to prove them wrong. And then it wasn't like I'm going to prove them wrong. It was like I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it.
Yeah, I get it. Well, there's a little competitive streak in there too, right? You're a soccer player and you want to.
That's the other part.
Right? Yeah, that's all right.
And then they brought me back out, did the same process, cut me again. And then they brought me back out, made me a backup singer. And I was like, all right, cool. I'm working my way up. I'm fine with this. And then cut me again. And then they brought me back out. And I finally made it into the group. And so from that point on, it was full force rehearsals every day from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. I'd drive 2 hours back home.
Yeah.
Go to soccer practice. And then I remember my parents sat me down and had this conversation of, hey, you're like 11. And you do more than most people do right now.
Yeah.
You're going to get burnt out really fast.
Yeah.
If you got to choose one, it's one or the other.
Right.
And so my dad was my coach. And so he was like, oh yeah, like I got this in the bag.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And then I was like, okay, cool, Dad. Like I think I'm going to do music. And he was like, okay, cool. Walks away. And he's like, what did you say?
Hold on,
yeah.
what? So you said, so this was a Christian-based group, right?
Yeah.
So was that based out of just like there was a church that sort of had this thing, or was it like the music specifically was Christian based? What was the story behind it?
The music was Christian based. So the whole thing about being the princesses was Daughters of the King.
Okay.
And I remember like even in the songs there was different messages, and and they did it so right where it was so obvious in the music, and. But also at the same time, it's one of those things of like, if you just heard it, you wouldn't necessarily think it's one of the. And there's another band that I'm trying to think of that does the same thing. A lot of people don't even know that they're a Christian band.
Yeah.
I can't think of who they are right now.
I don't know. Yes.
But it was, and it's hard because it's when you're 10 to 13 years old, who's your fan base going to be? And so what we wanted to do was get it into all the schools and so it's more subliminal in the young mind where it's like, oh, but they actually have learned all this before. And so I remember we would go into rehearsals, and then the first hour would be Bible study that we would do. And then, or we'd go down to Temecula and we'd go down to the house, and it was the founders of the group that wanted to make this a Christian band. They fully have given themselves to the Lord, and so they're like, we want to share this with people and get the word out.
Right.
And it all starts with being also good role models for young kids. And I really appreciated that because I was like, I look at artists and I knew that's like, I looked at them and I looked up to them in so many different ways. And so if I could be that way for somebody, I was like, I'm good. Like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And to be a part of that, I just learned so many incredible things from being there.
So here's a question. And now this is to a young girl, so it would be kind of deep. But did you go into it like just thinking music, stepping stone, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make my way up to this next thing? Or was the Christian values part of it, even as a young girl, like that was a big part of it? That
was a big part of it for me. I don't think at that moment I realized actually like the intensity of what it was.
Tough.
But that was also one of the things, because I mean, this is a world that I knew nothing about.
Right, yeah.
And I mean, and so when I went into it, it was like, okay, like this is fun. Like it was a fun project or whatever.
Yeah.
But I was like, but they're good people.
Yeah.
They're Christians. Like they believe in this. This is what their morals, their values. They were good humans.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? If I'm doing this, and even my parents and I had this conversation because they were like, we don't know what we're doing.
Right,
like we're just taking her to practice. What do you mean? That made it feel like such a safe space.
Yeah.
And it was so cool to have this camaraderie. I mean, even being with the girls, they were some of my best friends at that time. And I learned so much just from that moment of time about just everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds so vague, but it was, I mean, you're 10 years old, you don't know much at all. And
yeah,
that's the other thing.
We have to put it into perspective, right?
And so it's like, I and growing up, we weren't really, because of soccer and things like that, which to me now it's like wow, it isn't an excuse. There we go. That's a tongue twister.
I get it.
And so we never really went unless it was like the Easter and Christmas type thing. But I remember that was like my first, and my mom always grew up going to church and things like that. But I remember for me, that was like one of the big moments where I was like, oh, this is what this is.
Yeah.
And then I embraced it fully.
It seems like, from my perspective, especially if you're 10 or 11 years old, that's a great foundation to start with for what you're going to do, in the music business.
Yeah.
Now, what you take from it, I guess it depends. But it seems like, and two, like, from an outsider's perspective, it's like, man, you're taking young kids and, because I think that there's a stigma that's involved with, and I think we would all agree with this, when you're taking kids, like what's the show where they put, they do the girls go out and they dance moms is what I'm trying to think of, where there's like, is this more about the moms or is this more about the kids? It kind of,
Yep.
But it seems like in that case, it really came from a good foundation, from a good base. So that seems like a good place to start.
Well, and that was like the big thing. And then, I mean, it's like, oh, I'm leaving my daughter in rehearsal in another room. Like, what's going on? But I mean, so it's like you want to have at least that foundation and that base to know it's like, okay, this is who these people are. And we would sit down, we'd go to lunch with the owners and we would hang out with them. And so we just got to know who they are as people outside of just the group. And I think that was the other thing that I was like, okay, like this isn't just a facade, I guess. It's not just like the image they want to portray. This is actually who they are and what they do.
Wow. Well, that's good. So you were there.
No.
Do you know if that band is still?
It's so funny because it ended. I don't know. Sorry, I definitely cut you off on your question, and I don't know what your question was going to be. I was so excited.
That's awesome. Well, as you can tell, as we're sitting here, and the whole thing, the wind's blowing, and we're sitting here going like this.
Yep.
So there's also that going on too. But no, by all means,
no, go ahead. What was your question? Let me ask.
What was my question? I don't know. What was I about to say? Doesn't matter.
I'm sorry.
No, let's see. We'll backtrack a little bit. It had to do with foundation. You were talking to them.
You're bringing up something. Have they done anything?
Yeah. Well, ask about the band. Are they still? Do you know if it's still around or not?
All right. I said.
Yeah.
I won't cut you off anymore. I just got so excited.
No, I wish you would.
So after the group, I think the group ended, at least as of the 5 of us, when I was 12. Then they started another group type thing in the process with 3 of us. And then there was some things that happened, so it just kind of ended. But I want to say this year or last year, we got a text out of nowhere saying, hey, do you guys still have all of the costumes and things like that? Like, we're starting like another project that's similar to what it was. And we're like, oh my gosh. But also part of me is like, don't take that away. Like, well,
you should, the adult versions of you guys should get together and do a tour.
That's what I think. That'd be so fun.
That would be cool. Well, moving past that, so you were with the band, and then, of course, we're talking about a window of you're a kid, right? Yeah. But this all happened pretty quickly, because by the time you're 16, you're going and you're trying out for the show, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the group ended when I was 13, and then I started working in my solo career and trying to write and record and play out as much as I could. And at that time, because I had been in that pop world, I went with what I knew, and that was.
Would that be considered pop world? I mean, in that
vein, yes. Yeah. And so I started like writing, and I would still take dance class, and I would go do all these things, and then I just remember I was 16. I think I got an email asking if I wanted to audition for The Voice, and it was one of those things where I was like, I'm not 100% sure, but they had reached out a few other times, but I know I wasn't old enough.
Mm-hmm. Is there I don't know if there's
I don't know if there is now, but I know when they had asked me, they had reached out when I was 13, but it was like the 15 or 16 age limit.
Gotcha.
And then when I was 14, it was the same thing, so I still couldn't audition. Yeah. And then when I was 16, they reached out, and I think they had dropped it at that point to 13 years old, and I was like, I'm going to get shown up by at least 13-year-olds.
Oh, yeah.
No, it was.
Well, it's funny because when you're 16, you think the difference between 13 and 16 is this massive gap, and it's like, there's really not that much difference now.
There was, and the thing is, and that's the problem, is that I was like, oh, I'm 16, like,
You're
not that
a full-grown woman at this point. Right?
I never felt that way. I still feel like a child.
Yeah.
No, but I think when I was 16, at least from 13 to 16, it's like people have been doing music longer than I've been alive.
Yeah.
They've been singing, they've been doing in the industry longer than I've been alive. I was like, at least at this point, I feel like I have some foundation and some background to be able to hang with the big dogs. And so I went into it, and I had friends that had been on the show, and they had done a few other shows, and I had reached out to them being like, hey, like, what was your experience like? Like, what did you enjoy it? Did you meet a lot of people? Like, did you overall have a good time, or was it just horrible? And all of them were like, if you're going to do them, this one might be the best one. And they had the best time on it.
Yeah.
And I went into it as, I just want to take it all as a learning experience, because I never done the whole TV thing.
Yeah.
And that terrified me. As much as I love performing, I'm like,
That's a whole different deal right there,
And
especially live. I mean, I know if you fall off the stage, they can start it over again.
Oh,
but
I
generally
thought I was
speaking,
going to one time. That was funny. But yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, and in those ways, it's no different than you performing on a normal stage versus on being on the show. But you also have cameras, and it's being shown to a way bigger audience than what you're used to. And so, but I know I went into it as like, I just want to have fun. I want to take this as a learning lesson, grow as much as I can, and whatever comes out of it, great. I'm going to work my butt off. And if it works out, then it works out. But if it doesn't, there is no problem with that. This just wasn't meant to be, or it wasn't my journey at that moment of time, but I was supposed to go through it. And so I auditioned. I think I had a private audition. I walked in, and it was in this like rehearsal studio, and there was about 20 people in the room, and I was like, and that's like, I never get nervous when I'm on stage until there's only 20 people and I can see each of their eyes, and I can't see in general. So if I can see you, that's terrifying. I'm like, you guys are too close.
Yeah. Let me ask you, have you ever, and we'll get, look, I cut you off.
You're fine.
Yeah. Have you ever played at the Bluebird Cafe?
I have. I think I've played twice there.
Okay. So then you get the idea of people sitting right in front of you, and you can see their eyeballs all the way to the back because there's only 50 people.
Well,
right
that's
there, right?
the thing. It's crazy.
Dead quiet, and you got. So that's what I'm picturing whenever you're saying that.
That's exactly what it was like, almost. Right. Except they all were like, you give it like 10 feet back, and then they're right there, and I'm like, okay. And I'm like, what are you guys thinking? What's going through your head? And then you can read some people, and then you can't with the others. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. I was like, I'm going to do my thing, get out of here, and we'll see what happens. Yeah. And so I did the private audition, and then it was like, okay, go wait in this room, and they'll tell you if you move on to the next round. And then I moved on to the next round, and I remember they brought me back in for the interviews, and then they were like, tell me your life story. And I'm like, where do you want me to start? Like, okay. And I remember they were like, what do you do in your free time? And I was like, oh, like I go out to the desert and we ride like dirt bikes and quads and things like that. And like, and they're like, okay, cool. And I remember like they came back and they're like, your story is you ride dirt bikes full time. And I'm I ride them maybe like 4 times a year during the winter. Like that's about it. Yeah. I was like, I am not a competitive racer or anything like that. I love that stuff, but it was funny. But I just remember the whole experience of the show was just so much fun. Mm-hmm. I learned so much, and there were people there that I am still good friends with to this day. But I also remember at that moment of time, that was kind of like the turning point as to who I was as an artist. Because right before the show, I remember I was writing music, and I was like, this isn't me. Like I felt like I always felt like people were trying to tell me to grow up quicker. And I knew in my mind that I have the rest of my life to do this. Mm-hmm. I don't want to rush it right now. Because if I'm not enjoying it, then what's the point of it?
When you said you were writing, but you didn't feel like it was you, what were you writing towards? What was the reasoning?
It was kind of... So I'll say this. It's like I I'm the type of person, I go to bed at like 9 o'clock at night. I don't care to go out and go do those things. And unless like I'm with my friends and it's like we're going to be back and it's going to be an easy night, that sort of thing. Like I don't care to go do everything like that.
Where did that come from? Why do you think that's just a natural thing, or do you feel like you kind of grew up in a setting where it kind of catered to, you're not going to go out and party all night and be, I would say, I think it's more of like within myself. I've always been that way. Yeah.
I was like, I would rather put my head down and work
right
early on,
and
then reap the benefits or whatever you want to call it, that saying. But I don't know, like my dad, he gets up every day at 7 a.m. or 6 o'clock in the morning, is at work by 7:30. So like every single day. And then it's like my mom, she has always been like along the same ways. And I've always looked at it that way.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's so many bigger things in life. I'd rather make sure I got my head on straight.
Well, and not to sidetrack us from your story, but it occurs to me that, you're getting into music business and there's a lot of elbow rubbing that has to be done. You got to go out and there's got to be a tug, right, to stay up late and to go to this
it's like
event.
It's like I have no problem staying up late, but it's like if I got to be up at
we're not
8
necessarily
a.m.
talking about like bedtime as much as we are like social settings. You know what I mean?
And that's why I love coming out here, because it's like everybody is here in the same place versus back home. I'm an hour out, and everything is so. The right word would be. I don't know. It's just so localized.
Yeah.
It's all right there. You can go to one place, go see everybody, go to the next place, see everybody. And it's that sort of thing every day.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's really cool especially coming from where I'm at, like where I live specifically, there's not really any musicians.
Yeah.
It's people who are like ranch hands, farmers, like things like that. And then you have outside of our town, then you get a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Well, there's plenty of musicians around here.
Well, and that's the thing.
Yeah, you hit a golf ball and hit one.
It's especially really cool seeing people that are, I don't know, I love the camaraderie of it out here.
Yeah, and again, I'm really kind of digging deeper into, what drives you as far as, as an artist, as a singer, as a songwriter, and, lifestyle. So work ethic. Nose to the grind, go get the job done, and then get a good night's rest. Because you know the deal. I mean, especially on Music Row or in Nashville, like there's a lot of after parties. There's a lot of stuff that's going on, which doesn't mean that you have to indulge completely.
Yeah, you don't have to partake, but you could still be present.
But there's a lot. There's a lot of that. And a lot of people get kind of caught up in that lifestyle as well. So, so you're auditioning, you got it. People are staring at you, but you fought through it.
Yeah, and I just remember, and I remember being there, and I learned so much just from being there. But it was, and that's where the point I was getting at was, before I auditioned for the show, I was writing all this music, and I was like, this is not who I am. Like I felt like I was being told that I needed to be something else, and then I needed to have this sort of image and like be like this bad girl type thing. And bad girl is a very weird term, but it's like, I don't know, it goes back the to edgy sort of kind of feel. And I was like,
well, it goes back to
it's
what
not
you
believable.
said a while ago. Like, now you're the motorcycle in the desert, right?
Yeah, and I was like,
I'd like it, but that doesn't mean that's who you are.
Yeah.
Right? But you got to have an image. You can't just,
and that was the thing. It's like at that moment of time, I was writing this music. And I was like, but music is like an expression of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people have like this like alter ego type thing where it's like, okay, that's them on this level. But I'm like, I remember I walked into a meeting years ago, and they were like, you need to be prepared to be somebody else all the time. When you're at home, when you're hanging out with your friends, you could be yourself. But when you're out doing this stuff, when you're in public, you're somebody else. And I was like, I don't even know if I could be myself right now. And you're telling me I have to be somebody else?
You're still trying to figure out who you are in the first place, right?
And so, and I get that when you grow up and you're learning things. I mean, at 16, I thought I at least had an idea of who I was, but I was completely wrong. And so, but I remember that was like a moment for me where I was like, I'm putting my foot down. I was like, I can't do this. There is somebody else out there that can fulfill this same exact image, sound, this, that you want, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Like it's exhausting trying to be something that you aren't. And I remember that time. So it's like I went on The Voice, I'd say as a pop artist, but I left the show as a country artist because where I grew up, that's all we listened to.
Right.
I loved, and because of that, even like from being in that girl group, and having like that foundation and learning more about the Lord and God and all this stuff, it's like I always felt myself gravitating back towards that. But not necessarily in the pop world. And so, and where I'm from, it's like, all you listen to is country music. Like, that is it. And I mean, within my parents, it was a little bit of everything, all genres. But outside of that, I was like, I love everything about like the sound, the storytelling. Like, I remember somebody told me country music is music for real people. And I was like, I love that. It's just your everyday, this is what you do. Music, real life, the simple, the good, the bad, the ugly, the in-between. I was like, and there's substance behind it all.
Yeah.
And that's what really helped me gravitate towards country music. And so when I started coming out here and meeting people, it felt like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
And especially being out here, and not to say that because I mean, there's still great parts of being in California and LA and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I definitely notice more out here, and I don't know if it's maybe because I'm not out here all the time, but it's like the people are so welcoming. And that really, like, that inspires me, and to be around so many people that are like great.
Southern hospitality.
Well, and that's the thing. I'm like, oh, well, I've heard about Southern Bells.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what's true about that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's a really cool thing to be around people that are just so warm all the time.
Yeah. So how's your writing changed since the time when you were saying that you didn't really feel like that was you? What are you doing now that's different?
I feel like now it's just me. Like, even last year I felt like I was trying to still figure myself out, but now it's like the more I write and the more I'm like, okay, like, this is what I want to say in my music. This is this is what I want to be. This is who I am.
Yeah.
It's not even what I want to be. It's this is who I want. This is who I am. And I think the more and more I do that, the more it's like, it's just so easy now.
Yeah.
It feels right. Like, I'm like, okay, this is, and that's not to say in a year or two, something else, or I'm like, oh, I'm gravitating towards this. Like, this is what I've grown into. But that's the beauty about growing up and living life, is that you get to go on this journey.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just been, I feel like this year, and especially coming out with next year, like this music that's coming out is, I would say all of the stuff that I've been working on within the past 6 months, I finally feel like I've got like my who I am down in my music.
Wow. That's, and of course, as you know, that's going to change as you move along.
Yeah.
Are you in the process of, or have you finished like a record? Like, you've got a whole full-length record, or what do you got going on?
So as of right now, I'm kind of, I mean, the way that I've approached these writing things is that I'm writing as if I have a record or a project, an EP, album, whatever it is. And if they, at that moment of time where I'm like, yeah, you know what, I want to release this as an EP or a record, then great. But if not, they're all going to be singles as of right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the world we live in, right? Like, it's a singles market, and that's a whole nother topic that there's been a lot of things that have changed in that over the years. Are you interested in a label? Or are you interested in just, I'm going to do my thing, I don't need help?
See, that conversation, I feel like, can kind of go either way. I think it's so cool as an independent artist that you have social media at your fingertips.
Right.
Like, that is the biggest, I think, help as an artist nowadays.
It is.
It's like, you can post this, you could do this. The world is your limit. Like, there is nothing stopping you.
Yeah.
Which is really cool to see. But also, it's like, there are different resources that a label could do, or different things like that, than I wouldn't be able to do as an independent artist.
Yeah.
But I think as of right now, I want to get all like my ducks in a row and keep everything going, and get the music out and feel good about what those are, and then see where it happens from there.
Yeah, come up with your thing. It's so weird. The Music Row I moved to, you got a record deal. If you didn't get a record deal, you've got a very difficult road ahead of you. But record deal equals airplay, touring and all that stuff. I mean, you could still do it within a regional, thing. But, man, it's changed so much now. I mean, we see so many artists, that have just done it without.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting that but it's also very saturated.
Yes.
There's also a whole lot of folks out there doing that, right? So when you were doing The Voice, and it was Kelly, right?
Yes.
Did you give me something that happened that nobody would know about? Give me you said you almost fell off the stage or something like that.
So that one was more of... So it was my blind audition, and I remember I never felt nervous by any of it.
How do you never feel nervous?
Well, it's like I was there for a month prior to, like we're all in a hotel, like you got to do wardrobe, rehearsals.
Right. So you just don't walk off the street and there's this panel and you're singing in front of
I mean, if that's what it felt like the first time, and I was my goodness. But I just remember I would go into these stuff, and I never felt nervous. Like, everybody was freaking out, and I'm like, what are you guys nervous for? Like just give it your all. Like, if you know your stuff, you're good.
So that's knowing yourself then, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I am a perfectionist, and so I've tried leaning away from that because not everything has to be perfect. There's still something. There's stuff that's so cool that is just so real and raw and vulnerable.
Yes.
And I think because of the way I grew up, everything was so structured. Within even like the girl group, it was like we rehearsed all day until we got it perfect. And then when we got it perfect, we did it 20 more times, every single time perfect. And so I've always had that kind of instilled. But I think more that I grow up, I'm like, not everything has to be so it's not even scripted is a bad word, but it's like so to the mark, like if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just because there's something so real about being vulnerable and just living in the moment.
Do you do at this moment, or do you do any touring? Do you take full bands with you? What are you doing now?
Yeah, so I've been touring a little bit. I just came off earlier. I want to say like last month, 2 months ago. I did a what was it called? Southwest, like basically across all the Southwest. We went out to Arizona.
Take a band with you?
Yep, full band.
The reason I asked that is that if you're out there with bands and monitors and house, front of house PA and that stuff, something's going to go wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Almost every night. So you're going to have to figure out how you're going to live with that and deal with that, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier. You're a perfectionist, but there's certain things when it comes to music that you're just not going to be able to control.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, there's been cover songs that I've done where I've completely forgotten the words, and I'll just make them up. I'm like, it's the Presley remix.
What's the most embarrassing moment that you've had? If there's not like a specific one, like get close, but I know there has to be one, right?
I think when I was younger, there hasn't been too many right now. I haven't like ripped a pair of pants yet.
Yeah.
I know that's probably gonna happen soon. Now that I said
well,
it.
you've still got plenty of time to make the most embarrassing
I can't
thing.
wait. I've almost fell a few times. That was fun.
I get it. I went head first. I was playing, and it was back when we would do like a long set, and then we'd take a break, and we'd come back up. And I was on a stage that was about 3 feet up off the ground, and I'm a young guy. I'm just going to jump off the front of the stage, and there was a big crowd out there, and as I did, I just went, and both feet, not just one foot, but both of them got in the microphone cable.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
So it was just a complete headfirst dive.
Yep.
And of course, I just said, thanks, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. And then everybody's looking, and then here you go, Superman. It's a mosh pit with no mosh pit. But the worst part of it was the microphone went flying out into the crowd because it was a mic cable, right?
Yep.
So they come walking back up and hand me the mic, and I plug it in, and I'll never forget. I said, "Pride check 1 2, pride check 1 2." So you got plenty of time to have some really embarrassing moments. So.
I'm waiting for. I think I don't know. I think the most embarrassing one right now has just been forgotten words.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we just got to wrap the song up. Actually, you know what? I have one.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's more embarrassing or if just like worrisome. It was out in Palm Desert, Coachella Valley, and it was, I want to say it was like March or something like that, which usually doesn't get too terribly hot. But for some reason it was like 107 degrees this day. Yeah. And I had been hydrating. I had been drinking so much water, so much Pedialyte the whole week leading up to it. And we were playing, it was just me, I was playing guitar, and then I had another guitar player, just so there would be 2 guitars, make it sound nice, cool. And I was singing, and we got halfway through the set, and I look over, and I'm like, Jimmy, I'm about to pass out. Like, keep playing right now. Like, keep playing. And so I'm like, I grab a chair, I sit down, and then I start seeing everything goes like black and white, and I'm like sitting there like trying to figure out, I'm like, which way is up? Yeah. And so all of a sudden I was like, Jimmy, like, you just keep playing. I finished the song out. I need to go sit over there. I sat down, and as soon as I sat down, I like just like melted back. And then all these people started coming up, bringing me water. Right. I didn't fully pass out. I was just like, I'm very close to. They started bringing me water and ice, and they're like, we couldn't see it. Like, your face was turning white. Like, girl, you're so clammy. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And then I ended up going back out there, and like 20 minutes later, as soon as that was done. But that was a close call. That was probably the most embarrassing, because I've never passed out. Yeah. I passed out a few times, but not
on stage, right?
No. It's like because I'm in pain from like spraining my ankle, and I'm like, I could put pressure on it, and then I can't. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, passing out.
Well, how much through the years, and now you're traveling back and forth to Nashville and writing, how much has that original faith-based really come into play for you? I mean, have you really gotten into moments where, man, this is difficult, this business is rough, you really have to fall back on like something that you came from, where you came from?
It's definitely been a journey, but I think the more that I've come out here, so it's like, I'll give you a little more background. So I did the girl group, and then I remember it was, I think it was right before I was 16 and before I had a license. Or maybe it was right after I got a license, because I would drive all my friends from high school, and we'd go to Crossroads, which was a church back at home, and we'd go every Wednesday night. I would drag my friends, and I would say, we're going to HSM, like, we're going to go to the high school ministry nights tonight. Are you coming with? I'm leaving at 5:30 or whatever it was. And so we'd all go grab like In-N-Out or something beforehand. We'd go in, and we would just have the best time sitting there. Yeah. And so I did that up until I was 18, and then COVID hit. And I remember COVID was a big thing for me, because at that moment I was playing pretty often. And I started coming out here, and then all of a sudden it was just, or not at that point, but it was, but COVID hit, and I just remember it felt like everything was gone. Yeah. I took it for granted. And so that was like a real moment where I was like, okay, I'm sitting in my house. And then I remember I got a text from a bunch of my friends that were in the dance world from LA, and they're like, hey, we're starting like a Zoom Bible studies. We're going to do it 2 times a week. Like, do you want to be a part of this? And I was like, yeah. And it was actually really cool, because while we're doing this Bible study, they're also incredible performers too. And it's like, whether you're dancers or you're this or you're that, they would all do something that meant something with their journey with the Lord. Yeah. And I thought that was so cool. And so I started doing that all throughout COVID, up until things started getting lifted, and then it kind of just vanished and went away. But then I would say up until like within the past year, and it's not that I've purposely strayed away from God and things like that, but it's just like I've noticed that I haven't made it as much of a priority. And I will say this year has been kind of like the year of making it more of a priority, where I'm like, when things are hard, you don't only pray when things are hard. You pray just in general. Like, you do these things, but you don't ask for things. Yeah. But it's that relationship with Him, and I definitely see it growing more and more.
What do you think? And it can be many things, but when you say, I don't know the exact words you said, and I've been there before, where you kind of drift away, like you've got a base, you got your roots, but then you drift away. What do you think is the reasoning behind that? I mean, do you have a specific thought, or is it all over the place?
I think I
know what mine is.
I think I mean, I feel like there's a few things with what it could be and what they probably are. I mean, life kind of just gets ahead of you, and when you have those sort of things, but it always, okay, it's almost like one of those things that you take for granted. Because you think it's always there, and it is always there. It's like, okay, I'll brush it off. I'll put it aside.
Right.
Like I have this right now.
Got this.
Yeah. But, and it's like the more that I live life, I'm like, I don't got this. Like, but if I put my faith in him, what is supposed to happen is supposed to happen.
Right.
But I just need to live for him. And I think that's been the biggest thing. And so, I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's opened my eyes again, where it's like, I feel like I have another foundation and like another, even if everything is going wrong, this is the one constant.
Right.
And I think that is the coolest feeling.
It's interesting with music because, we are, especially if you're a solo artist, right? Like your thing is you.
Yeah.
My music, my stage performance, my voice, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's so tempting, especially when things are going well, to really go, man, I got this.
Yeah.
Like you don't think I don't need him because that's not where your head is, but you forget that you do, right? And then when things get really rough, it's so easy because, having been there through the music thing, it's so easy to go, well, why not me? What did I do wrong? Why can't I?
Yeah.
And the whole time you forget that he's right there, right?
Yeah.
And so what do you feel like? You said that this year you've really, circled back around. What do you feel like? What's the reasoning?
I think it's just been one of those things, like from last year to this year, I was starting to put music out and then meeting more people and then seeing their relationship with God and being in the church and praying and things like that. It's like I've always prayed, but it's not, I feel like I just haven't done it the way that feels like where I'm supposed to be doing it. It always felt like I was asking for something.
Yeah.
And that is so not right. Like you shouldn't be asking for things. I'm putting my faith into you.
Yeah.
And I think I've just strayed away from that. And it's like, I've come to little moments in my life where, within the past like year and a half where I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And it's like and I've always looked for something where I love having structure. I love knowing that this is what's happening and this is what I'm working towards. And I get that things can veer off and go sideways. And that's the way it goes. But I think at one point I was just like, there's something missing. There's something missing in my life. And I couldn't figure out what exactly it was up until it's like I started going back to church. And I am so thankful to be doing that. I don't know. I feel like the more that I put all my faith into God and not question things, because I know even during that time, it's like I was kind of like in this period of like, okay, I'm putting my faith into you, but I'm also doing this, this, and this, and this. And that doesn't necessarily align with what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not right. Like I need to just fully trust and put my faith into him.
It's interesting. You said, when you early on, you were saying all I was doing was asking for things.
Yeah.
And I always think about our relationship with God like we're children.
Yeah.
And so little children, when they first learn to talk, will just look at dad and go, I need.
Exactly.
But as you grow, if you will allow yourself to grow and you start to understand a little more, which sounds like, me and you both, we're figuring it out. We all are as we go.
Yeah.
But then you start realizing I don't just need to ask for things. I need to ask him what does he want, you know? And then he goes, now you're getting it.
This is
and so just pay attention, right?
Yep.
So then you get into this stage where you kind of have to go, all right, just stay out of the way and then pay closer attention, right?
Well, and I feel like within the past, like even I don't know, just recently, I feel like that's kind of how it's been, where I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to get out of the way. Whatever, like what you show me what you need me to do.
Yeah.
Or what I'm supposed to be doing, not what you need me to do, but what I'm supposed to be doing or whatever it is. And I don't know, I feel like everything has been a lot more clear.
Yeah.
I don't know, at least I feel like what is supposed to be happening, I'm like, you know what? I'm not questioning it. I'm gonna let this be, and it's supposed to happen this way.
Well, what happens, I think, and you will, I think you'll agree with this, especially in music, is that you work, right? So you're working hard. You're doing everything that you know to do. Then you get frustrated. Well, why isn't this working? Why isn't that working? The frustration's not him, right? That's us, because we have this idea for what it is we want to have happen. And it's not happening. But I think that he, at some point, starts asking us to give him the frustration, the anxiety, the worry, the I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing. And that's his point of going, it's okay. I got you. And I feel like that's so we, especially with music, I mean, I guess it's that way with everything, but God, you have this vision, right? You know what you want to do. And
well, I mean, I'm going to bring this up just because it's so crazy. I remember one of the first trips I ever made out here. I also went down to Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and I had written with this gentleman named Michael Curtis, and I remember he was like everything. And that was like also a big moment for me because I learned so much from him. I was with him for 4 hours maybe. It was me, him, my mom, and we sat there and we wrote, and all of a sudden he was like, no, like he's like, I have gone through stuff. He's like, but I have fully put my trust in the Lord and my faith in the Lord, and this is exactly what I'm supposed to, like, this is what I want to do from now on. Like when I write music, I want it to be for him. I want it to be for this. He's like, and I walk into writes half the time, and he was like, well, they asked me what I want to write about, and I say, I want to write about Jesus. Like, what's better than that? And it was so crazy because, like, just recently, my mom and I were talking about this. We're talking about him, and I went to go track yesterday for a new song, and he's from Alabama. I mean, that's not too far. It's 2.5 hours. But, you know, it's like he's got everything else he could be doing. And all of a sudden, I sit down, I look over, and I saw him, and I was like, this is so weird. Like the fact that everything that has kind of just been, I don't know, just going on in life. And I referred back to him not even a week ago, and I haven't seen him in 4 years. And I'm like, this is a weird, but such a cool moment to have right now.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I may be catching you off guard, but before we got started, I asked you, you know, like, is there any kind of verse or any kind of, you know, saying? And you said, you know, actually there was something very recently that do you have access to that?
I said I can try to find it real fast.
Well, yeah, do that. And while you're looking that up, songwriting. So we'll dig into that a little bit too. But I do want to know what your verse is that you.
What is it? Where is it at? 2 Peter 3, and it was verse 18. Yeah. But grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. To him be the glory both now and to the end of day of eternity. Amen. And it was a whole thing about this entire about the entire 2 Peter, and it was mainly about like growing, and growing can be gradual. And I remember, and I was like, this is just hitting right about now. And I remember sitting there and I was just like, yeah, this is like, I don't know, it was in this moment of time, or in that moment of time, this was like last week, and I was sitting there. I was like, this is exactly how I'm feeling right now. And it was, but everything came back to, you just have to trust him and step aside and let him show you what he needs. Yeah. And I was like, okay. And he's like, and it's a scary thing. And I remember he was like, it could be a scary thing. You're putting trust into him, and you've been trying to trust him, but it's like, until you fully just give your all and let him say, okay, I'm waving my white flag. Mm-hmm. Show me what is supposed to be happening.
Right, yeah.
Then it's going to make sense. Yeah. Because otherwise it's just, if you keep doing this, oh, I'm asking for this, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that, you're not going to get anywhere. Yeah. Like a little bit, but it's not the same
you'll get somewhere.
Yeah.
But we tend to think that we have this vision of, we have a vision of where we think we want to go with our thing, right? Yeah. And then we have a vision of, and it's a scary one, of what it looks like if we go, no, I'm going to just abandon all of that and just give everything to him. Yep. Then that can be scary too, because you're like, well, what does that look like? Yep. You know, I mean, especially as a singer, or as a songwriter, because I think you're like me. I love country music. I always did. I grew up listening to it. And then there's a fear where you think, wow, if I really do give everything to him, which right off the bat, if you're thinking that means that you're not.
Yeah.
So there is that. That's very telling. But if I really do, what does that look like for music, you know?
Yeah.
Because I love country music. So, and I'm not going to sit here and give an answer to what, what the answer is to that, but it definitely, it's an intimidating thing, but that's what he wants.
Yeah.
And I know for me personally, through the years, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give, if I make a record, I'm going to do one song that's a gospel song or that's it's a Jesus, derived song.
No.
And I look at that now and I'm like, so basically I was saying,
You're
I love you, but only 10%.
Yeah.
I don't get the other 90s for me.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, we got to learn how to give that 100 and then not worry about what it looks like, you know?
Yeah.
So, but that's great. And what I took from that was when which was a simple verse, right? From 2 Peter.
Yeah.
And then, but it says all glory to him, right?
Yeah.
And like all.
Yeah.
Not just a
and,
little bit.
And that was the whole thing. I mean, there was different things, but that was the one that stuck out to me, that kind of just outlined everything from that day. But it was like, if you give, it's not just bits and pieces. It is all.
All.
Because without him, and there was another one, I'm trying to think of what it was. Psalm something.
Well, even if you don't remember
but
the
it
verse,
was,
yeah.
It was basically it was like, we are nothing without him.
Yeah.
We are built on him. We are built because of him. And so when you don't like basically, I'm trying to think of what it was exactly and I can't, but it was, we are nothing without him. And so we need to put all of our faith into him and our trust and our guidance. And even if you feel like you're living in the moment blind, but it's like, you know that he's got you.
Yeah.
And that's been another one that stuck with me. So
I remember when I was first moved to Nashville, it was about 2 years in. So I was in my early 20s and I would drive back to East Tennessee. And this is just one specific moment. So when I was driving back, a lot of times I'd get off the interstate because I wanted to go like a side roads, and there was this one road between here and East Tennessee. You climb up this mountain and there's an overlook, and I would pull up there, and I had an old Jeep. It was like a 95 model Jeep, and I remember sitting on the hood of it. Sun was setting, and I would do it every once in a while when I would drive back to my hometown, and I would just sit up there and ponder. I think anybody that's an artist, singer, songwriter ponders and really digs into that a lot, especially if you're out in the desert, right? So I remember that, and it was so strong. What a strong feeling that was of like, the whole world is out in front of me, and what am I going to do? And me and I and me, I.
Yep.
And I have recently, within the last little bit, realized that that's him, right? But that's those feelings, because he made every bit of us, and he made those feelings to long and yearn for him.
Yep.
But I was going, what kind of country music singer am I going to be, and what does the future look like for me? And it's like, he gave us those feelings, and then culture or the world just really kind of gets in front of us and clouds our view of what it is that he wants from us,
Yep.
And man, I wish I would have tapped into that earlier. So, well, listen, would love to have you come back and hang out with us sometime, and come back to Miss Judy and talk a little bit more. And do you have any tours coming up? What's next on your plate?
Yeah, so I am headed back home in next week. That's not next week.
Yeah.
Sometime in next week.
Right.
On the 7th, and so after that I'll be beginning of December and end of December I'll be doing a run out in Vegas during NFR week. So if people are going out there, I'll be playing. Everything is up on my website. And then I have a bunch of shows coming up that are going to be announced for 2025. Crazy to think what year we're in. For some reason, I was like, oh yeah, we're in 2025. I was trying to figure this out yesterday, and I was like, I don't even know which way is up at this point.
I get it.
So, but in 2025, there's a lot of stuff coming up that'll be announced there.
So NFR in December, where are you? Were you?
We'll be at Old Red.
Okay.
Man.
Okay, yeah.
Man.
So, yeah, we used to go out there when I was playing with Jamie. We would do the Golden Nugget, like some Saturday at the final, day or whatever. But that's fun.
Yeah.
Vegas for NFR it's a lot of fun.
And I'll be over in Stoney's right beforehand as well.
Okay, cool.
So yeah.
So we can obviously PresleyTennant.com. I'm assuming
Yes, sir.
website, but you've got Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. We can find you out there, and then your music, I'm sure, is on all the streaming platforms.
Everything that you can think of.
All right, well, good deal. Well, you guys go check out Presley Tennant, and thank you so much for
Thanks
coming
for
and
having
hanging
me.
out. And
I appreciate it.
I look forward to seeing where God leads you.
Well, thank you.
But all right, guys. Well, thanks so much, and till I see you next time, get out your Bible, put on your armor. God bless you. All right, guys. That was Presley Tennant. Just such a blessing. That was a great conversation. Look forward to seeing you guys next time, and I look forward to having Presley back on here at some point and keep up with her career. I'm sure she's just on the front end of a really exciting journey. So God bless you guys, and like I said before, make sure that you click the buttons and share this with your friends, subscribe and like and follow. All right, God bless you guys. Hope everybody's well. We'll see you next time on Fully Armed.